Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today it's in the form of a little bit of a set review. The Edge of Eternities set is just about to drop, so I thought I'd take a look at what cards I think might make an impact in the legacy format and go over them for you lovely people out there so you get a bit of a leg up on what you might be seeing in coming weeks. As well as a few things that just interest me and I want to see people playing around with. First up we have Siege Ship Brood Tender. This is black-green for a 2/3. When it enters, mill 3 cards. You can pay 5 to sacrifice it, and then you return target creature or spacecraft from your graveyard to the battlefield. Only as a sorcery though. Now, we're not returning spacecrafts because I don't think any of the spacecraft cards are any good, but we have seen decks playing cards that mill them. So the Stitcher's Supplier in Hogak decks have even run things like Satyr Wayfinder in the past. This is a better body. A 2/3 isn't terrible stats for 2 mana. And not only does it mill stuff, but it also has a relevant ability. So when you are putting in a deck with things like Stitcher's Supplier or whatever, this is just going to let you turn over some more cards and then also capitalize on the cards you're turning over by being able to reanimate something. Now, is this card going to make huge waves? No, but I've already seen a few people thinking about toying around with this one, and I've got a list myself that wants to use this. So I think it's going to see a little bit of fringe play. Whether or not it's good enough to see more play after that, I don't know. But we like doing stuff with the graveyard that's sort of synergy based and not just A-B kill you sort of stuff. So I'm excited to see where this one can land. Alright, here we have Umbreal Collar Zealot. This is a sack engine, so you can sacrifice another creature or artifact and surveil 1. It's 2 mana, but it's also a 3/2 body, so the stats on this are pretty decent, and we've seen cards like this see play in combo decks in various formats in the form of Viscera Seer. Viscera Seer is a 1 mana 1/1 where you could sacrifice a creature to scry 1. Surveil is much better than scry because the graveyard is definitely a zone that you can access and do things with. So, being able to mill over a big chunk of your deck, potentially. So if you set up some kind of infinite loop with this, you can just mill your entire deck, and we already know that milling over your entire deck is a way that you can win the game in Legacy. But the fact that it's just well statted for 2 mana as well makes me think that people are going to find a home for this and maybe do some cool sacrificing shenanigans. It's also a human and a cleric, which aren't irrelevant creature types either. I wouldn't be surprised to see people messing around with stuff like this. Whether or not it's up to the current power level Legacy, I don't know, but maybe at some point in the future we can see some cool, like, Project X style decks make a comeback. This next card is pretty interesting. It's a 2 mana enchantment called Weapons Manufacturing. Whenever a non-token artifact you control enters, create a colorless artifact token named Munitions when this token leaves the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. So if you put this down and just strung out a couple of baubles, and you had something that could sacrifice artifacts, I guess you could use the previous card we spoke about, but you could also use things like Arcbound Ravager, which occasionally sees a little bit of fringe play here and there, or just any way that you can sacrifice artifacts. And all of a sudden, you've got these little shocks that you can ping out wherever you want. So you can use them for board control, you can use them to kill your opponent. I think there is quite a lot of juice worth squeezing out of this one. We've seen a deck that Killer Bee likes to run where it plays a whole bunch of like 0-drop artifacts and just keeps looping them and doing like Echo Vion's style stuff. If you have this in play and then just a way of sacrificing those artifacts at some point, then this can be a difficult to deal with thing that's going to give you a win condition. And the fact it leaves the battlefield as well means that there's not really a way your opponent can destroy all these things, and at some point you're going to be able to sack them and do something cool with them. So I think there's definitely a combo deck in the making with this one somewhere, especially since we already know that Baubles and Lotus Petals and stuff are very playable cards in the format. This next one, I put it here. I don't think this is going to see a lot of play, but it's kind of interesting. This is a 4 mana legendary creature. It's a 3/5 on its body, so it's going to dodge a decent chunk of removal, but it's still going to get picked up by Swords to Plowshares and stuff. It says other creatures you control have haste. So we're going to play this for 4 mana, and then we're going to have to wait a turn cycle before it gets to do its thing. That is a pretty big hoop to jump through in the format of Legacy, because it's not really doing anything on the board the first time you play it. However, if you can end up having 3 mana after this is in play, then we get to do some cool stuff. Artifact cards and red creature cards in your hand have Warp for 2 and a red. So for 2 and a red, you can put it from your hand into play, and then you exile it at the next end step, and then you can play it for its regular mana cost from the exile zone. Now, if this creature's in play, your creatures have haste. So if you were to put in, let's say, Blightsteel Colossus for 3 mana, that would just come and dome your opponent. Now, this could be something that is like an additional sneak attack through the breach style card in decks. I don't think it's really good enough because it's very easy to interact with and it's very slow, but I know some people are going to try it out, and I would kind of like to see it do something. I'm not very hopeful. I think this will have a lot of people trying it and then realizing it's not any good, but figured it would be an interesting one to point out. Seam Rip is our next entry. This is not necessarily very interesting, but it is very good. It's a single white mana enchantment. When this enchantment enters, exile target non-land, permanent, and opponent controls with mana value 2 or less until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So, Portable Hole is a card that sees a decent amount of play in Legacy, quite often off of like Karn Wish boards, but you do see it in various other decks as well. This is the same effect, but an enchantment, which makes it harder to destroy than an artifact. But a lot of the synergies with Portable Hole are people who want to have an artifact. But I think this is going to see a place in some decks here and there. I'll certainly be playing it in a enchantment-themed white deck at some point on the channel soon. I thought I'd group these two cards next to each other because they kind of go together in my mind. Eumidian Hatchery is a land. You can tap it to pay 1 life to get a black mana, but you also put a hatchling counter on it. And then when this land is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, for each counter on it, you get a 1/1 black insect creature with flying. So that's pretty good just for putting mana into your spells, which is what you want to do anyway, right? But you're going to have to find a way to actually sacrifice this or put it in the graveyard. Now, you can waste down your own stuff, but if you watch my channel, you know I quite like a bit of the old Smallpox on the channel. This is a perfect card for Smallpox, because you can add some mana, you Smallpox, then you're left with a creature afterwards, or perhaps multiple creatures. So it ties in really nicely with the game plan, and it's just a straight 4 of in the Pox deck. I'm quite excited for it. Timeline Color goes right next to this. It's a 2 mana 2/2 with haste. You may cast this card from your graveyard using its warp ability. So its warp ability is black, pay 2 life. So you get to hit them for 2, and then it goes back into exile, then you can cast it from exile for 2 mana and bash again. So, what do you want in a Smallpox deck? You want cards that you're happy to discard. Timeline Color is exactly that. It's going to go really nicely with this Hatchery and actually give Pox a little bit more juice. Now, is Pox going to be a great tier 1 deck in Legacy? Probably not. But it's a very popular deck among the Pox community, who is quite vocal and loves watching my videos, so I'm certainly going to be putting this on the channel, so stay tuned if you would like to see this sweet action happening. Cosmogand Zenith, a 3 mana 2/4, so its stats means it's probably not getting picked up by any red removal. It's going to have to take, black and white removal to deal with. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, choose one. Create 2 1/1 human soldier tokens, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now, we've already seen a deck that plays 2 spells in a turn to get a really cool effect in the form of Corey Steelcutter out of the Delver decks. Now, this is a similar-ish effect, and there are already people who are splashing white with their Corey Steelcutter decks for various reasons, and some are even going quite heavily into white. So this could fit alongside that. It does a similar sort of impression of Monastery Mentor. It allows you to go wide, and it also allows you to go tall by stacking counters or whatever. So I think this card might see a little bit of play, or at least people testing it in those sorts of shells. Whether or not it ends up being good enough, I don't know. But if you're playing a deck which is trying to Xerox, as in play lots and lots of cards that replace themselves, cantrips and stuff, then this is going to get you quite a lot of value quite easily. This was the first card that was spoiled of the new set, and I think it deserves a place on our list. Tezzeret Cruel Captain. It's a 3 mana Planeswalker that enters with 4 loyalty, which is huge for 3 mana. And whenever an artifact you control enters, put a loyalty counter on Tezzeret. So that's the only way you get loyalty on this Planeswalker, is by playing artifacts. However, the rest of its text does help you with that endeavor. So for 0 mana, you can untap target artifact or creature. If it's an artifact creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Now, there is a deck in Legacy right now that I think is very good, and it runs 7 key effects, which is just there to untap artifacts. This can do that untapping of the artifacts while also doing other things. Now, yes, this can't be tutored off of an Urza's Saga, but it can kind of do an impression of Urza's Saga at the same time as well, because its -3 ability is search your library for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. So this is kind of like an Urza's Saga thing, except it doesn't tutor it to the battlefield, it tutors it to your hand. But also, it can tutor stuff with mana value 1 or less. It doesn't have to be 1 or 0. So you can go and get something like a Portable Hole with this. So there's quite a lot of utility in this already, and it's doing a thing that a good deck already wants to do, so maybe it'll get a few copies in there. And then the minus ability is 7. So you're going to have to play a few artifacts to get this going, but I think it's pretty reasonable. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 3 +1/+1 counters on target artifact you control. If it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 robot artifact creature. So you basically just turn one of your bits and pieces into a 3/3, or you can start stacking stuff up on one of your creatures that already exists. So it kind of is doing like an Urza's Saga impression in a lot of ways. So I think this one will see some testing. Whether or not it's going to be good enough at 3 mana, I'm not sure. But it's a Planeswalker rather than artifact, so it means it's not going to necessarily die as easily to some of the hate. So if you're getting locked under like a Null Rod or something, you can just turn your artifacts into guys, because you can still play out all your cheap artifacts. They won't necessarily do anything, but you can play them all out, stack up a few cards on Tezzeret, and then Tezzeret can just minus, and all of a sudden all your like 0 mana artifacts are going to start turning into actual threats and eventually win the game. So I think this one has got some juice worth squeezing. I've grouped these two together for this next one because I think they will probably end up in the same deck, if anywhere. So, Melded Moxite. It's a 2 mana artifact. When this artifact enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. So, effectively, it's card neutral filtering because you have the Melted Moxite itself and the card you discard, and you get 2 new cards. Now, we know that Fable of the Mirror Breaker letting you discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards is one of the most powerful modes on that card. I guess all the modes on that card are really powerful, but it's definitely a really good thing that helps red decks get that looting and card manipulation that they often lack. So you have that. But then you also have another mode where you can pay 3, sacrifice this artifact, and get a tapped 2/2 robot. So what sort of deck is going to want this? Well, it's Painter, because you can keep weldering this in and out, in and out, in and out, and then you get to keep filtering your draws, and this can also put itself in the graveyard to come back again with like a welder later on, whilst generating some like mid-range value. We've seen a bunch of like weird little artifacts like this. So there was the Legion Extruder was one that comes in and shocks something, and then you can sacrifice artifacts to make guys. So it's kind of similar in that sort of vein, except this one's going to be drawing you cards rather than dealing damage, but that's still an effect that you're going to want. In a lot of ways, you're going to want the drawing cards effect or the looting cards effect a lot more than dealing damage, generally speaking, because it's always going to be a useful effect. So I think this could see some play in some Painter decks. Next up, we have the Rust Harvester. This is a 1 mana, 1/1 with Menace. It's an artifact creature, which is another reason why it's probably going to be worthwhile in the old Painter decks, because they have a lot of manipulation with their artifacts. But the activated ability is what we want this for. 2 mana, tap, exile an artifact you control from your graveyard. Sorry, an artifact card from your graveyard. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Then it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Now, this isn't going to be amazing on its own necessarily. However, if you were to, let's say, Goblin Engineer, put this in your graveyard, and then you have Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which is quite a common card in the Painter decks, you can then put this ability onto any creature you want. And once you start doing that, all of your creatures are just pay 2, tap, exile whatever from your graveyard. You're going to have artifacts in there anyway if you're playing Painter. And then you get to dome anything you want. So you can use it as board control, you can use it to kill your opponent, you can sit and hide behind your own ensnaring bridge, and then just ping your opponent down that way. So I think this is going to have a little bit of juice worth squeezing. Whether or not we're going to see it as a staple in Painter decks, I don't know, but I would be incredibly surprised if somebody didn't at least try it out a couple of times. Again, I've grouped these two together, and I'm sure you can see why when we start going through them. The first one is definitely more interesting. So this is Pinnacle Emissary. It's 1 blue red for a 3/3 artifact creature robot. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless drone artifact creature with flying. This token can only block creatures with flying, but you can warp this for just 1 mana. So, in the 8-cast deck, you could, let's say, pay 1 mana to warp this in, and then you could play, I don't know, 3 0 drops, and then all of a sudden you've got 3 power of flying creatures straight away. And they're artifacts, they count towards your affinity, so it's going to help you casting your like Kappa Cannoneers, your Thought Monitors, your Thought Casts. It's just going to help you sort of grease the wheels of your game. And then later on, you can use your Mox Opal or your Lotus Petal or whatever to get that red, and then put it back into play and keep going. Now, I think this is actually going to be pretty interesting. Sai is something that they used to play in those decks, but it ended up being like, oh, why would I play Sai? Because by the time I play Sai Master Thopterist, that costs 3 mana. I've already played all my zeros out. But this is saying, you warp me on turn 1. Then you play all your artifacts out. So it's right there, as soon as you start the game, to make sure you're getting extra value. And if all of your artifacts you play end up being 2 artifacts, you might be able to do like turn 2 Kappa Cannoneers relatively easily. So I think this is going to see some play in the 8-cast shells. How good the 8-cast decks are at the moment, I'm not wholly convinced. But I think this card might be enough to give them a shot in the arm and see a few more copies top 8 in some events. The other card, Emissary Escort, a little bit less interesting. It's 1 and a blue artifact creature, Robot Soldier. It's a 0/4, but it gets +X/0, where X is the greatest mana value among other artifacts you control. So, this is kind of doing like a Twerk Stompy Patchwork Automaton style effect here. So it's a 2-mana thing, but you can't play it off Ancient Tomb, so you will need like a Mox or a Lotus Petal or whatever. But in a deck that wants to play Thought Monitor for 1 mana, so it's paying 1 mana for a 7-mana card, this can be a 7/4. Now, does that deck need another 2-drop stompy creature like this? Is this better than Surge Injure? Personally, I don't think this is good enough, but I think people who play 8-cast should at least test it for a little bit and then disregard it. So I thought I would mention it. Another insect on the list for you lovely people now, IceTill Explorer. 2 green for a 2/4, so again it's going to dodge like red removal, it's going to need black removal and white removal to mostly get rid of it, and it can do pretty good things in combat as a 2/4. But its abilities are really sweet. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Now that is a line of text I enjoy a great deal from my Magic the Gathering cards. But it's got more. You may play land cards from your graveyard. So that is one of my all-time favourite lines of text. And then it's got another line, landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, mill a card. So it finds you more food to then get more lands back. So why do I think this card is actually going to be good? Because 4 mana is a lawful lot in Legacy. However, I like playing things like Ramunap Excavator in fair Green Sun Zenith decks so I can assemble a Wasteland lock. What this card does is cost you a little bit more, but you get a much better body that's not dying to Lightning Bolt. And when you go and play your land for turn to get to 5 mana, then you go and Green Sun Zenith for this. You then get to play one of your lands from your graveyard immediately, which is something that you don't always get to do with Ramunap. Ramunap Excavator, you kind of think, oh, this is like a turn 4-drop, right? I pay X and a green, X is 3, I go and get my 3-drop for 4 mana. But then you don't get the value off Ramunap, so you actually want to do it a turn later. This, you do it on the same turn that you would normally do a Ramunap Excavator, and you immediately get the value as well. So I think there is something to this card. Is it going to be like breaking the bank and doing lots of really cool stuff, dominating the format? No, but I think if I'm playing some sort of relatively fair Green Sun Zenith deck, having this and Wasteland feels like a dream to me. Like, you can just have this and fire off 2 Wastelands a turn, and who doesn't love doing that to their opponent? So this is one I've definitely got my eye on, and I'm going to be playing on the channel for sure. Emergency Eject. This is a removal spell that I think might actually be okay in the format. So, 2 and a white, instant, destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a lander token. So lander tokens are basically a 2-mana artifact. It's an artifact you pay 2 and sack it, and then you get to rampant growth pretty much. So in the Legacy format, people don't necessarily have huge amounts of basics, so that downside isn't that big a deal. But it's an instant speed way of destroying any non-land permanent. So you see a lot of control decks, like blue-white control decks, that people like to play, that have to play a 3rd colour, because you need Prismatic Ending. This is kind of able to replace a Prismatic Ending, because this allows you to answer any non-land permanents, which is kind of why you're playing Prismatic Ending. But Prismatic Ending kind of wants you to then go up to 4 mana, so you can deal with things like the One Ring. Now this doesn't deal with the One Ring, because it says destroy, not exile, which might be a tick against it. But it's instant speed, and it interacts pretty favourably. We've seen cards like Get Lost and stuff like that see a little bit of fringe play, so I wouldn't be surprised if this started popping up in people's sideboards in sort of like slower white control decks. And the last card on our list. This one is an absolute banger. Frenzied Baloth. Green for a 3/2 with Trample and Haste. It can't be countered. It says creature spells you control can't be countered, and combat damage can't be prevented. Now that last line, generally speaking, wouldn't have been that big a deal. However, there is a card called the One Ring, which is doing some real work in Legacy. It gives them a protective shield. So you could just, okay, my opponent thinks they're safe, they've got their One Ring protection, I'm just going to Green Sun Zenith for this card. It's going to come in for 3 damage alongside the rest of my board. Damage can't be prevented, which gets through the protection your opponent has, and means that you just get to crunch through and absolutely mangle your opponent. As well as, you know, blanking opponent's counter spells, and just being a very efficiently costed body. This card is great. Now, it's a fair card, and Legacy is not necessarily the fairest format, but I think all the lines of text on this are really good. Being a 3/2, not necessarily the best stat line, but it is quite aggressive. Quite often you'd expect a green creature to maybe be a touch bigger, maybe be a 3/3, but it's still going to die to lightning bolts the same way whenever it is. I can definitely tell you that getting this in a lot of matchups when you're playing like a fair Green Sun Zenith deck is going to be a lot better than getting the Allosaurus Shepherd. Because Allosaurus Shepherd is okay, it's a 1/1, so it's very easy to be killed off by things like Bowmaster and just dies sort of incidentally. This does not, and it says creature spells you control can't be countered, so it doesn't care what colour your creature spells are. So you can end up getting a nice selection of different coloured creatures in your deck that you can keep playing out. whereas Allosaurus Shepherd is only caring about green spells. Now, obviously, this doesn't stop your Zenith from being uncounterable, whereas the Shepherd does, but Shepherd is a 1-1 like we established, and the extra ability on Shepherd in terms of the pumping all your guys only really matters if you have elves. This is just a big chunky guy that's going to help you get through the One Ring, which is going to win you a pretty reasonable percentage of games, right? I think the win percentage you will have against the One Ring decks by putting this in your Green Sun Zenith deck is a significant percentage, and this is definitely 100% going to see some play in Legacy. Alright, there goes our little tour through the Edge of Eternities set. I think there's quite a lot of stuff that has promise in this set, especially for a standard legal set. I think there's more stuff in here than there was in the Final Fantasy set for sure. Now, how much of this ends up sticking in Legacy and being a thing that becomes part of the format going forward in perpetuity, I am not sure, because, you know, Legacy is a very high power format, and right now it's kind of skewed a little bit in terms of what is good, because we have one super top deck that is pushing a lot of other things down. However, there are some really sweet cards in this set, and I'm excited to put them on display for you lovely people on my channel, so please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss me playing with any of these weird and wonderful Edge of Eternities cards. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget Turbodepths, as well as 3 tiers of support. A low-cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed Turbodepths guide that is updated every month, as well as regular articles, and lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above, as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.